I just step in just to give all of us a very brief introduction of Professor Wang. Dr. Yiping Wang, she received her BA in Early Childhood Education from Nanjing Normal University, and she earned her PhD in Child Development and Family Studies at Purdue University. Right now, she has 2 children, aged 13 and 17, and she lives with her family in... 7. I'm sorry, 13 and 7. Right now they live in Bellamy, New Jersey. Dr. Wang, actually, she is professor at Rutgers University, and her research focuses on the early childhood education. So let us welcome Professor Wang to give us this keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very kind introduction, Jenny. It's actually very exciting for me to be here and to learn, to explore what does that mean to be bicultural in this country. Is that here? Okay. This topic about how to raise bicultural children is very special to each of us because as immigrant parents, we have so much hope for our children here. And at the same time, we have so much uncertainty. And in our daily practice, sometimes we don't know what we are doing and get frustrated. Even I have a PhD in early childhood education. My husband said it doesn't help. We still cannot hear. Better? Okay. As I said, even I have training in early childhood education, I still feel the challenge of how to raise American-born Chinese children here. I want to start the topic. You have a title? The title of this talk is Becoming American, Maintaining Strong Asian Identity for the 21st century global society. I want to start this talk by sharing with you my personal experience, how I got interested in this topic about bicultural children, and my past 13 years of try and error parenting experience of raising 2 children here. About 20 years ago, when I was a graduate student at Purdue, I lived with an American family. The husband is Caucasian, Harvard graduate. The wife, Lynn, is the 4th generation of Chinese American. Her great-grandparents came from Guangdong. So Lynn grew up in California and was the chair of the department at Purdue. Living with her family for a few years, she shared with me her personal experience of what does it feel being Chinese American here. She often gets comments from people she never met before here. Lynn, you speak beautiful Chinese. Where did you learn? And she often responds, actually, English is my only language. It's my mother language. I only speak English. Then one year she went to China for the first time, and she was trying to ask directions in Chinese. In that environment, try to practice, but she had very limited Chinese. So the person kind of gave her a very weird look and walked away. When she gave a talk at the university, a college student challenged her. Now, you say you're Chinese, but you don't speak Chinese. How can you call yourself Chinese when you even don't speak Chinese? And she felt so bad. She just didn't know what to respond. These are the moments throughout her life that she encounters on every day. I mean, not every day. The experience of being Chinese American. Even though she's the 4th generation of Chinese American, and she's pretty almost assimilated to, very well assimilated into American culture. She has interracial marriage. Her she has academic leadership position. Her very incompetent in the culture, but when she meets people who doesn't know her, particularly with strangers, their first response is, the impression is, you're Chinese, you're not American, you're Chinese. By asking questions, you speak beautiful Chinese, assume she's not native speak. And when she's with the Chinese, she's not being received as Chinese because she speaks very poor Chinese. So this sense of being rejected by here, or in the Chinese culture, she's not being part of it, and the sense of belonging to nowhere really stuck in my mind. On one side, it really gave me a chill feeling that it may not be a good idea to have a Chinese baby here, and then grown up and with the feeling of belonging to nowhere. But on the other side, I got a very strong desire. I want my children to have a sense of having the best of both worlds, because they have better opportunities than us or than Lynn in terms of have American society to socialize them to be American. At the same time, we have our Chinese parents, authentic Chinese parents, to prepare them to help them to develop a sense of ethnic Chinese identity. So, I'm married to a Chinese husband. We have 2 children now, one 13 years old and one 7 years old boy. For the past 13 years, we try to give them different opportunities for them to have exposure to the Chinese culture. For example, my husband and I spoke Chinese for 5 years before we had our first child, because both of us feel that English is always a challenge for us and we always want to improve. But when our daughter came along, we decided and we switched to speak Chinese at home, because we want their first language is Chinese. And we had for the first 2 years of their life, for both children, we had a Chinese caregiver at home, kind of to reinforce this Chinese-speaking environment. We also have children attending Chinese school since they were 4 or 5. And there are those days my daughter would say, I hate Chinese school. I hate go to Chinese school. And I said, and I understand it's a very difficult language to learn in terms of writing, but I'm only waiting for one thing. It's in 10 to 20 years, you're going to come back and tell me, Mom, thank you so much for pushing me to learn Chinese, because I know it's going to happen. But other times, we take our children back to China every other year, and sometimes we even enroll them into the local local school, like daycare or elementary school, for 1 month or few weeks. And actually, this summer, both of our kids went to Shanghai for 8 weeks and attended summer camp with the local children in Shanghai. And 2 years ago, we moved to Rutgers from Cincinnati. The main reason we want to move here is New Jersey is a much more diverse community, and particularly have a lot of Chinese families here, and we feel that it's very important for our children to have a Chinese community to support they can identify with, as rather than feel they are so different. In a Western environment, in the Middle West environment, they are so different from others. So after 13 years, do I have the confidence to say I know how to raise bicultural children? The only thing I can say, I may lay a good foundation for them, but it's only in the beginning. It's this teenager age now, they start to explore the meaning of being Chinese American here. And this is the experience that I have no personal experience to relate to understand how they are going to live through this process, who they are. And I feel that I'm not prepared for it. And actually, this sense of not being prepared, I feel challenged to raise children here by culture. It's also reflected at national level in the field of child development, because Asian American population is the fastest growing population here, but at the same time there is very limited amount of knowledge or research on the psychological adjustment of Chinese American children, the development process of psychological adjustment, and the Western child development theory mainly based on white and middle class population, and there's very limited focus on how racial minority status will influence our children's psychological development and for Asian Americans. So given this context, I really want to applaud the PCE club to take the leadership to bring all of us here together to explore this topic. It is a very important topic for every parent here for us. So given this background, now I want to, the rest of talk, I want to kind of bring a conceptual framework to understand the pattern of psychological adjustment of immigrants. And then within this framework, try to identify what are the developmental challenges, the issues that our children, the second generation of Asian immigrants, children going to face. And then to see what are the different parenting strategies that we can help our children to develop. And then the purpose of this talk is more raised awareness about the bicultural children. And I'm not a clinician, so I will not do any case study. And it's more provide a framework for us to start to discuss on this topic. Thank you. In order to understand the patterns of psychological adjustment of immigrants, it's very important to understand this racial hierarchical system of the United States. Within this system, there are two processes taking place regarding to immigration adaptation. And it's called acculturation and ethnic identity. And with these two that describes the adjustment process. And with these two dimensions, it will create 4 types of psychological adjustment. And we will see, it kind of give you a direction of where our children are heading to in different patterns of adjustment. When we came here, we all have experience of adjust to American culture, to adjust to American society. Now, what is American culture? What does it mean to become American? Who defines what American is? And race or racial identity plays a key role, very important role, in the process of our adjustment to the new country. When we say race or racial identity, it's our physical appearance. We are born with the color skin, the hair, the eye type. It's something we came with. But this racial identity is a system of power. It defines and gives the meaning between the racial relationship between different ethnic groups. There is a dominant group, there's an ethnic minority group. And there are 2 perspectives to define what is American culture and what does it mean to become American. The assimilation view suggests that European American culture is the dominant culture of American society. So the central process of becoming American is that diverse ethnic groups adapt to a shared European American-based culture and to gain equal access to the opportunities of society. So ethnic minority ethnicity, it serves as a disadvantage in adjusting to American culture because you have to learn the English, you have to learn the European-based culture in order to adjust to the dominant society. Now, the alternative perspective is a pluralistic view. American culture is composed of a collection of diverse ethnic cultures. And all ethnic groups are integral part of American society. So becoming American means is to maintain a diverse ethnic cultures while becoming part of the society rather than outsider of the society. The ethnicity or ethnic culture serves as an asset or the social capital in our that contribute to the successful adaptation, because diversity means enrichment, diversity means strength. So it's as an asset rather than as inferior or as a disadvantage. Now, these two perspectives in contemporary American society, the pluralistic view is getting there. And we start to see the company policies to embrace diversity. But a simulation perspective is still pretty dominate the research, the discussions of adaptation to a psychological adjustment to the United States. Now, these two adjustment process, they both affect the psychological adjustment of the immigrants, so they are related, but they are different to some degree. Acculturation is the process to which individual changes and adapt to the dominant culture or to new culture or dominant culture. And ethnic identity is the degree to which an individual identifies himself or herself as a member of his or her own ethnic group. And the focus of the interest for acculturation is more focused on gain the knowledge of the dominant culture. And ethnic identity is more focused on the identification of individual towards the ethnic culture group. So the adjustment orientation for acculturation is a process moving towards the dominant culture, and ethnic identity is moving towards the characteristic of one's ethnic heritage. And the target population, go ahead, yeah, is acculturation is more applicable to the immigrant population, like us, first generation of immigrants, adjust to the American culture. Ethnic identity is more applicable to the second generation, which is our children, second generation of Asian immigrants, or the subsequent populations. Acculturation is more challenging for immigrant population, and ethnic identity is more challenging for the second or the third generations. Now, based on these two dimensions, it creates four groups, four types of psychological adjustment. Bicultural group, which means actually I start with assimilated group. That's the group is a high on acculturation. The opposite of that group is separated group. They are high on ethnic identity, but lower on acculturation. The bicultural group is both high on acculturation and ethnic identity, and the marginalized group is low on both. And I'm going to describe a little bit what kind of behaviors profiles for each group. And can go to the next one, thank you. The group, these are the individuals who have strong desire or identify themselves as American. And they are westernized to a great degree in their life, in their identity. and it has very little impact on their ethnic background, on who they are and their culture practice. And many times they are basically Westerners with Asian face if it's for Asian Americans. An example might be the situation I described to you, like Lisa, to some degree. Even within this group, there are big variations. So example is Lynn's, she is very much assimilated into the dominant culture, interracial marriage, and the leadership positions in this dominant society, and her friendship circle are predominantly non-Chinese. And she lost her her ethnic language and does not practice much Chinese culture and custom at home. So sometimes we can see our kids, the second generation, they are pretty much assimilated to the American culture. The second group is separated group. This group, they are high on ethnic identity. They maintain strong ethnic orientation about who they are and the way they live. And they have little desire to assimilate to dominant culture because of the interactions, either personal preference and the restrictions. So they have like limited knowledge, English, and these are the one like most recent immigrants and the individuals who live in ethnic communities, such like in Chinatown. They're very functional in that environment, the way they live, and there's no interactions or very limited interactions with a non-Chinese community. The third group is a bicultural group. This group who are very well integrated into mainstream culture at the same time maintain strong ethnic identity. And they move very easily in and out of both culture and feel very comfortable and confident, relaxed in both culture settings. And these groups who appreciate the cultural differences between two groups, and they are able to manage it to make it a positive outcome for them. And I think a lot of our friends here would fit into this group. The last group is marginalized group. They have acquired very little of American culture, and at the same time, they are uncomfortable with their own ethnic identity. They have no sense of belonging to either of the group, and they have very difficult time to manage the differences between two cultures. And maybe one extreme example, like the games, they don't relate to both cultures and then become very angry, very isolated, and very disgusted about life in general. So there is a small group of people fit in this group. So there are different types of adjustment patterns, and the researcher has demonstrated that the bicultural group is the most successful group as adaptation. And for children who have bicultural competence, bicultural identity, they have they have a higher self-esteem, they feel good about themselves, and they have better grades. And for grown-ups, this group, they show have a high life satisfaction in family, in friends, in communities, their health and their finance. So given this context of the kind of environment our children are going to grow up, what are the developmental challenges or developmental tasks that our children are going to face in order to become bicultural or in order to avoid being marginalized? So I'm going to start this discussion by watching a videotape skit. And I think many of you probably already watched it. Let me see. maybe just take a 2 minutes break.
model community 了。本来的 model community 总是让我们的小孩压力很大。现在我觉得，如果我们能达到 high assimilation、high ethnical identity， 这个的话，我觉得也不是，我觉得境界就不一样了。要有人已经达到的话，可以分享一下。我觉得我好像还差得很远哈。我看我先生每天这看中文电视、看中文报纸的时候，我就说，我已经1个礼拜6天、5天吧卖给那个老外了。他自己是老外，你叫我在家里还要看英文吗？我的中文怎么maintain呢？所以现在我已经不急了。后来我想也是哈，你怎么舒服怎么来。但是我现在觉得他给了我一个尺度，你怎么能 high assimilation、high ethnical identity？ 要是这样的话，大家也都舒服，我们不用勉强。
没有声音。How many of you have watched the tape? You. Do you? We have 2 kids. And it was middle of the night, so mom was very anxious looking at the grades. So there's A's and A's and A's, A's and A's, and I don't know how many classes, more than 10 classes, I think. All the A's and A's and A's, and suddenly she stopped. They said, B plus? B plus in English? 她就叫起来了 very dramatic. And she said, why B plus in English? And now he's choked and tried to explain why he got B plus in English. And he said, I had a bad English teacher. And mom said, doesn't matter whether you have bad English teacher or not, whether it's true or not, it's still B plus. And so he said, we came from far away country called China. We give you birth here, and you got a B plus? And so she was very dramatic, upset, and say, what kind of punishment you should have? And so when he was crying, say, you don't cry like a girl, and be responsible, be responsible for your own behavior. So I said, what kind of punishment? And he said, Eric said, timeout. And the mom said, timeout, we don't do white people stuff. In China, we have called a knockout. 痛打一顿, right? So that's the gist of the story. It was very dramatic, and the kids actually did a pretty good job. About 4 million people viewed the skit, and there are over 1,000 responses. We can stop that now. Yeah. So the comments, so all this response, I kind of scanned through some responses, and one common response was, it's so amazing, it's stereotypical. Amazing, so amazing, it's so true. My mom's the same way. That actually a lot of responses as a great video. It was so funny. And there are some responses that, no, my parents don't do that to me. So the gist of the story here is why we pay so much attention to straight A's, why it's so important to us. And it's because both in U.S. culture and in Chinese culture, education is very important. It's believed to be important for you have a good job here in the future. And particularly in Chinese culture, we came all the way from here, and there's a high achievement ties to our family pride. So the take-home message is academic excellence. Can you go back to the... Academic excellence is a critical and the first step towards successful adaptation to American society for children of Asian immigrants. And I say it's critical, there's part of that, but it's the first step. And I'm not going into the details of the central attention on our children's education and the tense, the relationship between us. I'm not even going there. But the way accept that education excellence, it is critical, but it's the first step towards successful adjustment. Because we know straight A may cut to Harvard, and straight A won't cut to the corporate leadership structure. There are more than straight A's that to help us to be functional, to be successful in this culture. So given the framework we had about psychological adjustment, what are the developmental issues or tasks our children are going to face and our children needed to develop? What does that mean to be successful in the United States for Asian Americans? And I see 4 skills or 4 tasks or 4 competence that we need to help our children to develop. Besides academic excellence. Next, please. One is to develop American identity. Feel confident in the mainstream culture. Have a sense of, I am American. And the second is to develop a strong ethnic identity. To be competent in the culture setting. And the third is to develop coping skills to deal with racism, prejudice. And the fourth is to develop 21st century skills that our current education system are not designed for this globalization of 21st century. So I'm going to go over each task and follow this format. First to identify what is the developmental task or competence, and then to identify unique parenting challenges due to immigration, and then propose or identify parental socialization strategies that we can help our children. To develop an American identity, our children are going to call American as home country. We call China, we call Taiwan, we call Hong Kong, we call India. It's our home country. Our children are going to call America their home country. So it's very important for us to help our children to develop this sense of American identity. Then what is American identity? There are 6 components, and 3 are more abstract term-oriented and more principle-oriented, and 3 are more daily living-oriented. Principle-oriented is more political ideology. American stands for freedom and justice, and American welcome ethnic diversity. And to be American, to have being proud of the country. And the other three is more related to the cultural exposure and customs, tradition, behaviors, and social status to define American identity. Now, different ethnic group define what does it mean to them for being American or American identity is very different. It's influenced by more focused on principle-oriented because a European American culture is the dominant culture. They do not perceive they perceive their culture as the norm rather than ethical culture. So when you ask them what does that mean to be American or American identity, they more focus on this political ideology, ethnic identity, and patriotism. When you ask Asian Americans or Asian born here, they also identify this principle-based identity as a part of being American, but their notion of being American also relate to their experience. Because the culture differences, because the racial status difference, for Asian Americans, they also equip to American identity with dominant culture and with traditions and the behaviors of the European American culture and being a majority member of the society. So the being American or American identity means different things or different component means different for different ethnic minority group. Next, please. So when we try, what are the challenges for our parents and try to help our children to develop American identity? The one particular challenge is related to this intergenerational conflict because of the two distinct culture difference. An example is the difference in acculturation rate. Our kids much into the American culture, much quicker, much easier, and much faster. And for the immigrant parents, we're much slower, much bumpier, much more difficult. And so we are in the different rate of adapt to American culture. And then difference in the focus of attention. Our children focus so much on right now, I want to fit in. I don't want to be different. In very concrete way, the way they dress, the activities they enjoy. And for the parents, we are so much into future-oriented and focus on academic. That is the most important thing for us. And so there were created differences. And also difference in culture involvement. Our children are much more involved in American culture activities than parents us, just like Yin-Ting mentioned. After work, we very much socialize our own culture group, and we don't have much time either, right? But the kids, they are much more involved in American culture activities. And different ways to resolve the culture differences. Our kids may more tend to be American way to resolve, to adjust. And we probably still tend to more towards to the Chinese values. Next, so how we can help our children to develop a strong sense of American identity. I think we are doing very well in terms of encourage this personal achievement, work hard, self-development, and to achieve in this country. So this message is very clear for our children. Now, this encourages cross-ethnic group interactions, and we kind of see a pattern for our children's friendship. When they are young, we see our kids relate to all kinds of kids, all ethnic groups. But when they get into teenage years, it seems like they tend to relate more to their own culture group. An example of my daughter, we moved here 2 years ago from Cincinnati. When we were in Cincinnati, we lived in Jewish community. We attended private school. So there was limited opportunity for our children to find a Chinese friend. So she has many non-Chinese friends. And after we came here, we moved here summer 2005, and her birthday was in March. So her next birthday was in March, and invited 12 friends over for sleepovers. And among the 12, one is Caucasian, one is India, and the 10 are all Chinese. And that has been her patterns of pure friendship for these past 2 years. And on one side, I'm very happy that she relates to, has same ethnic background friends. And at the same time, I start to have a little bit of concern. If she continues this pattern, that means she's limited herself to develop skills that relate to all kinds of people, particularly at this formation age. But I think the reason it might be that because our children are so much into education and they typically find friends who in the same level as they are, do the project together. So, and another thing is because the emotional connection is much easier for our children to connect with the same background. But I understand once they get to the colleges, they are going to diverge again. But when they're still at this formation age, I would like to see more interactions with all kind of group, not just one predominant group. Another thing is really to encourage good citizenship, full participation in the society. And a role model example is, as some of you may know, that I'm currently a board member of Montgomery School District. I was a board member before for 4 years when I was in Cincinnati for my children's school. It's a Montessori elementary school for children from 3 to 12. And I know what does it take to be a good member, good board members. Your time, your expertise, and many times your money contribution as well for the private schools. As a board member, you take the leadership in every aspect. So one day so I was debating on what I should run for Board of Education this time. I feel that I was not ready, maybe in 3-4 years, but not now because this school district is much bigger and I'm relatively new here. So one day my daughter came home and I was working at home that day. She walked into my office and said, "Mom, are you okay? You seem like you're spaced out." I said, "Yeah, I'm having a difficult time to decide what I actually should run for Board of Education because there's a great Chinese community here really encouraging me to run for the Board of Ed." And I said, "What do you think?" I'm really having a difficult time to decide. She said, "Mom, you should have run because you made the school better when you were in Cincinnati. And you're very responsible, you work hard, and you have no procrastination because that's the issue she and I have been working on to procrastinate." Then I said, "Well, what happens if I'm elected? That means it will take a lot of time away from you and Nathan." And she said, "Well, it will help me to be more independent." And she's 13 years old. And by talking with her, it really encouraged me moving towards to decide to run. For a few things. One is, for the past few years, she did observe the participation of me involved in the school and the positive change she's noticed. So participation, contribution, she observed and see the impact. And then the second thing is, she relates this involvement with how it relates to herself. I will become more independent. So there is encouragement from her. And for me, I feel that if I can have the children to have the experience of not just focus on ourselves, our family, can we move a little bit beyond and the family environment so they can be more aware of there's more things beyond ourselves. Actually, it was so funny. The next day, not next day, the next after election, the second day, my daughter came home and she said, "Mom, I have 2 complaints. My teacher said we need the new equipment for the gyms." And then she said, my peer said, you should fire all those teachers who don't give us straight A's, or the A plus actually, don't give us an A plus. And then my son said, can I bring complaints to you too as a board of member? So they start to observe, sense what board does. I mean, it may not be exactly correct, but they start to see how the school system run and what does that mean to them. So that was kind of an example. Because of my daughter's understanding and her support, I decided, and it's kind of give her a role model how to be part of the community and how to make the positive change rather than being an outsider, which is a typical stereotype of us, being an outsider of the society. I'm going to skip this reinforce. And so the second developmental task is to help them to develop a strong ethnic identity. Through childhood and adulthood, a central task for us is to achieve identity. That means who we are. Who am I? At age 45, I know I'm a woman. I know I'm a mother with 2 children, and I know I'm married. I know I'm a career woman by profession. And I'm proud of by those identity. For our children, ethnic identity is essential part of their identity in this diverse cultural environment. They are going to go through the process of questioning, am I American or am I Chinese? Am I both or neither? Or am I belonging to third group, which we don't know if it exists, and how to define that third group? So the difficult part for us is how to help our children to go through that process and not being confused and learning to have a solid identity of who they are. Again, here ethnic identity is the degree to which individuals view themselves as members of a particular ethnic culture group, and they incorporate the specific cultural ideas, values, and practice into the self-concept of who they are. And it has 3 components: affect component, cognitive component, and behavior component. The affect component is the self-identification or self-labeling. I am Chinese. This is the first sign that children incorporate ethnic identity into part of who they are. And another component for affect identity is the sense of belonging. I belong to this group. I belong to this club. And have a positive attitude, feel proud of, get satisfaction from being part of that member. They could also have negative attitude. I hate being Chinese, the rejections of their own ethnic group. And they also could have a mixed feelings or mixed attitudes towards different parts of the characteristic of an ethnic group. One way to measure that component from a measurement is I have strong sense of pride in my ethnic group and its accomplishment. The second component is cognitive component. They have interest and knowledge about ethnic history and heritage. And they are involved in learning. There are 2 types of learning. Passive learning by observing or just being at home, that what we practice at home. And active learning is they're going out, actively seeking information about their history, about the ethnic history, about their parents, how they. There's active searching for information. The example is I have spent time trying to find more about my own ethnic group. The behavior component is covers involvement in different cultural practice, including language. And it also has the component of a level of competence and carrying out each behavior in that particular ethnic setting. example will be I participate in the cultural practice of my own group, such as special food, music, and custom. Now, these three components, they can interact, influence each other, but they also can operate independently. For example, there will be people who know so much about the ethnic group and the history and the heritage, but they do not participate in any kind of cultural activities. But on the other side, the more you know about your culture, your heritage, your customer, the more confidence you are going to have to carry out those activities, how to relate to people in that group. So the next, ethnic identity development is a dynamic, ongoing process. And it is a negotiation between individual and the environment. That environment can activate your ethnic awareness. For example, when you're in a group of all white and you're only Chinese, you immediately heighten your awareness you are Chinese. And another example is this Virginia Tech incident. The student was Korean, and it kind of raised our ethnic awareness. There's this ethnic affiliation, we are Asian. So the situations will activate their awareness. Another part is it's also ethnic identity is a developmental process. Our children go through different stages. Typically, their sense of who they are start at home. But once they enter different environment, where they start to be aware of the differences in their physical appearance and the language they speak, and they may start to confuse who they are. For example, a kindergarten boy, when they ask the mom, "Mom, who am I? Am I Chinese? If I'm Chinese, why I don't speak Chinese like you do? And if I am American, why I don't look like American kids in the classroom?" And after today, a girl said, "I'm Japanese," and she said, "I hate Japanese." So kids are going to encounter that kind of situation. But in general, for children, once they start aware of the differences, initially they want to be confirmed to American identity. They want to fit in. They don't want to be different. But eventually, they are going to come back to be more interested in Chinese culture, particularly like college children. And I remember one friend told me that her kid was very upset and yelled and said, "Mom, why you didn't teach me Chinese when I was little?" And the mom said, "I took you to Chinese school. You say you hated it, you tortured it. I just don't want to go." So parents give up. But the kids, when they start into college, they become more aware of their cultural heritage and become interested in the game. So eventually, they are going to integrate both American identity and Chinese identity, and to be comfortable with both identity. And the research has demonstrated that have a strong ethnic identity relates to a high self-esteem and relates to the high sense of self-efficacy. Yes, I can do it. And because they have the higher self-efficacy and confidence that they are willing to try, they are willing to take the challenge, and they do better for school. And also high ethnic identity relate to their help them to be better able to handle racism and discrimination in the society, because they know who they are and they will be able to proactively respond to them. Now, the unique challenge for our parents in help them to develop this healthy ethnic identity is the differences between in the meaning of being Chinese between two generations. We developed our ethnic identity as a Chinese at our home country. When we came here, we already have solid, stable identity who we are. Even though we are still in the process of adjusting to American culture, there's no doubt who we are. But for our children, they develop their Chinese identity in this culture and in the home environment within the United States. And it has very limited direct exposure to the home country where the practice. So their exposure is very limited, and then there's back and forth between two cultures, and it's a much more confusing process for them. And for us, sometimes we probably not aware of what they are going through. And second, it's hard for us to relate how does it feel like in that confusing stage, and then how to help them. So parent socialization strategies, some examples. It is very important for us as parents to take the leadership and ownership to help our children to develop ethnic identity, because the American education system is not designed to, it's not their focus. Yes, they promote ethnic culture, but the main focus is to socialize them to become American. It's only the parents need to take the responsibility and the ownership to support the school when they encourage more culture, heritage activities. The second is deliberate teaching about the culture, heritage, and ethnic pride. In many different ways. For example, we can do family trees. And even my daughter loves to watch after Chinese movies like 还珠格格, this fun part. So they watch family movie together. But maintaining ethnic language, it's much easier for our children to learn the language when they're early, when they are still young. And particularly in this global society, the connections, the business opportunities, it's an asset to have when you speak a second language. And also as to their identity, when you don't speak Chinese, people won't be able to say, it's very hard for them to say, I'm Chinese, when you don't speak Chinese. It's just from Lynn's experience. And when you don't speak the language, it's very difficult for them to relate to people with the same cultural background. So maintain this ethnic language is very important. And it is a challenge even for me. My daughter, we spoke Chinese to her till probably she was 10 years old. Then we switched to English. Mainly it's because we realized that her Chinese language, it's very difficult for her to express her emotion, what happened in school. And she loves to talk, and we feel like it really limited her capacity to talk, and we realized the communication with her is much more important now. So we kind of switched to Chinese and then down to the tubes. Her Chinese, I mean, she's still able to speak Chinese, but it has limitation. Another is providing direct experience with ethnic culture group. For example, for them to join the local school or camp where they are forced to learn the language, but at the same time really adapt to the environment that they are not, sometimes not comfortable. For example, the bathroom situation. It's very uncomfortable. I took my daughter to Xinjiang this time, and quite a few situations, the bathroom situation is even harder for me too. But she didn't complain, and just took as it is and went on and had a great time. So exposed to the direct environment for them to feel and able to adapt to. And I can utilize ethnic community resources. I think PCE club is a wonderful, wonderful community here. I've been from California to Midwest to East Coast now. This is the first time. Actually, I know there is such a club, and you're doing such a wonderful job. I look through your website and look at the presentation you both did. It's just incredible resource and support. And support for our children, not only support the parents and also support for our children. So I really applaud for your club doing so well. And the third one is to help them to develop coping skills to deal with racial prejudice. And as we know, American already made a huge, huge progress in eliminating discrimination laws and practice And the current cultural environment is much, much more pleasant and positive to embrace diversity as a standard, as a best practice even for the companies. But at the same time, because the racial hierarchical system of the society, there are still evidence of prejudice, stereotypes in everyday life. And there are some studies did about what does it mean or feel being Chinese American when it's being perceived as foreigners. And often you can get a question, where are you from? I'm from New Jersey. Yes, but where are you really from? And which means when you ask these questions to Caucasians, that means the region where you're from, which state, which part of the country. But when you ask Asian Americans, it means it means different. It means your nationality, and sometimes you hear you speak beautiful English. That means you're not native speaker. So it gives us a feeling of being offensive from the study. They feel very offensive when they are being asked, where are you coming from? And they feel it's being perceived as outsider and not part of America. And particularly our children, and they're part of American. And they feel like they are not being perceived as American and being rejected. And also you speak beautiful English, and they kind of give you underlying assumption that you're lack of American, you're less American. Another theme come up about the everyday experience of Asian Americans is the authentic ethnicity expectation. Particularly in the instance like at the workplace. Nowadays, so many companies have operations in China, in Asian country, and sometimes they sign you to that country, giving assumption that you have a connection with the ethnic culture outside of the U.S., giving assumption that you speak Chinese. And many times people don't like that because they feel very annoying. Because through their childhood, they don't have a connection with China. They don't speak the language, and they feel some kind of disappointment and very resent sense when people assume you have that connections. Another example of being perceived is the model minority. The next one. Example is my daughter was helping her classmate for the math homework, math assignment, and her friend said, "You're Chinese, and you're smart. How come you're not in math at the advanced class?" And my daughter felt hurt and felt kind of a failure. I'm supposed to be in that group, and I'm not. And we talked with her. We said, well, you moved from Cincinnati, went to Montessori school, and a different teaching style. We don't have a grade. We don't have tests. And you came here, and we didn't pass the exam. And there is a gap, and it's okay. We don't want you to skip what we have not learned it. It's okay to be in that group. But for her, when people come and you are Chinese, why you're not in math advanced class, it really hurts her feeling. So the challenge for parents in that particular, in terms of prejudice, one is we parents, we have lack of experience of what does it mean to be Chinese American. Because being Chinese American is different from being Chinese. The meaning is very different for two generations. And we have limited knowledge and practice skills of how to help our children to cope with these skills. Like that boys and girls say, I am Japanese, I hate Japanese. What do I do? How to help our children not being hurt? So next is what are the ways we can help our children? One is to help children to understand different perspectives of the racial hierarchical system of the society and be aware of the likelihood of inclusion and exclusion. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed it's going to happen, but be prepared and why it's happening. when children understand the reason behind those behaviors, they are much able to handle it psychologically and not being detrimental to their sense of self. And the second strategy is to teach children coping skills so that they can respond in a proactive way. And there are some studies done on adolescents, African American, Latino American, Japanese American, and here are some strategies after adolescents. The next page, please. They use to cope with the prejudice with discussion. And here's the example they give. I try to talk to the person to try to clarify things with them about common misconceptions about the ethnic background, kind of in a more discussion term without being offended. And another self-affirmation. I love being Chinese. To me, it seems like asset because I can speak Chinese. So this being proud of Chinese really help them to in that kind of situation. And that is the educational approach regarding where are you from. Here's the example. Excuse me, I think what you mean is what's your ethnicity? As far as my nationality, I'm U.S. citizen. As far as my ethnicity, I'm Chinese American. So in a way that to clarify, sometimes people ask that have the underneath assumptions or they are even not aware of what they're asking. And many times we have to give some ignorance, it's unintentional. There are some ignorance is intentional, but the majority of time we assume the ignorance are unintentional. And it is our opportunity to help them clarify what they mean and even to share how does it make me feel. Another approach that adolescents use is it makes to disapprove. It makes me angry. It just makes me want to work harder to prove them wrong. And another is I think ignorant. I think you should forget about it. Go on with your life. And the last one is more aggressive. If they talk to you rudely, I probably answer them back with rudeness. You treat me rude, I treat you back rudely. And from the study, a majority of adolescents all experience some degree of prejudice. And the majority of them use this proactive style, which means educational discussion, self-affirmation, and actually a lot of them use ignore because it depends on situations. Each strategy, it depends on each situation how to be effective. And that study also demonstrates that teaching and preparing our children to deal with racism is related to their battle grades, and it creates a great sense of personal efficacy. I can do it, and I feel good about themselves. And also they use more proactive styles rather than aggressive or not functional style. And they are more aware of the multiple possible ways to deal with prejudice. I'm actually going to stop here because it's almost 3, and this is another topic itself, I think. I don't want to stop. So if you want to open for questions.
Yes, if you have questions, you can ask Professor Wong.
教授讲到了那个people come to me say 你好，谢谢。我说 OK， 谢谢你中文讲得很好。So where are you from? I'm from medicine. Where are you really from? I said China. Why are you asking that? That's a long time ago. And then they said, I think that you speak English well. I said, so is your English Chinese? Then after that, I told my colleague, I said, every time they think they are giving me a kind of accomplishment, I feel offended. I feel like I am like an American citizen working here as a regular employee. Why you always single me out as somebody else? Just treat me as a regular person. So when I read this, I think it's so truthful.
那个什么的增加负担啊。那个今天的主题是那个心理健康的那个就是怎样培养，但是呢你也说了，就是这个好像是比较 challenge 的啊。我想问一下的话是说，心理健康你觉得跟这个智商是情商？对不起，情商是什么的关系呢？或者说跟个性是什么关系呢？因为我们说培养一个心理健康的人，那有的人说你怎么说这个心理健康呀？我还觉得克林顿总统不健康呢。那人家别的人说，那是我们的光辉榜样啊，就应该像那样子培养。所以很多人对这个心理健康的话，实际上是有不同的定义的。那作为你是搞这个专家，你觉得怎么看这件事？
This is a pretty complex question, actually. I don't know there is an answer to that. And the only comment I can make about Clinton is he compartmentalized his life. So on one side, he is a role model or as a leader. On the other side, he do have problem, and he's very good at compartmentalize his life. And I can't comment on whether he's healthy or not. But regarding to the challenge here, the meaning of 心理健康, what do we mean? I think it's difficult to define 心理健康. When you say 心理健康, do you feel good about yourself? Or versus regarding more mental health related, depression, they are very much related, but because of the Chinese term, and it's difficult to define what is 心理健康. And I want to hear more from you.
Actually, from everybody, 其实这个问题，我想，可能就是所有的人来的人，可能都是想，就是说知道一下，因为大家一说心理健康，大家都说对呀，然后就应该这样，我们就想培养一个心理健康医生。可是真正你要是自己说，到底是什么样是心理健康呢？其实每一个家长，我想他大概都有自己的定义。那这样子的话，你培养的方式可能就不太一样子了。还有一个问题，其实也是给大家讨论，当然也跟那个谁一平就是也共同讨论哈。就是有的人说，我心理健康就是比较开朗啊，什么就是 social 啊，比较 sociable， 比较什么 leadership 什么什么。但是其实你再想想看的话，有些人他不同的个性，这种个性，有些人可能就觉得是。这人怎么有病啊？然后呢？但是有些人可能就觉得，哎呀，这个人很有个性啊。你实际上现实当中，我们自己可能也会有这种情况。所以呢，我觉得就是好多的东西是，yes。就是每一个家长，就说自己在所谓培养孩子的时候，先得问问自己，你的那个目标是什么？就是你想到底孩子是怎么样子？是想大家都一样子呢？大家现在都很努力，都培养，然后最后培养的孩子全一个模样，跟别人全一样，是这样的，那心理很健康，因为都跟大家对差不多。但是，对吧？你要是说，很有个性的话，那你就得要有 suffer 这个性，说不定就有点毛病啊。别人看他的时候是不是就不一样？所以，对我只是说想给大家一点对讨论的话题。
I think it relate to okay.
哎，王老师你好，很高兴听你的讲座。我姓陈，我叫陈静英，我有3个孩子，比你多一个，50、15，所以是有 baby 有 teenager 啊。当然，我刚听你讲座的时候说你的孩子你在加州有去西西那提，现在有搬到 New Jersey 来啊，那就是说在华裔当中，可能你现在搬的地方是华裔最多的地方，对于你孩子认识这个认祖的这种感觉可能会多一些。那我呢就问一个比较我 personal 的问题啊，我也听你讲说你的孩子先送私立学校，现在我不知道是公立学校。
在 Montgomery 公立学校。
公立学校啊，
Yes.
就是你能不能在公立学校、私立学校方面，也许公立学校就是中国人更多一些啊。 就说你说他既要有人族的感觉，觉得 pride of Chinese， 但是你也希望他跟其他族裔的人有比较好的交往，是吧？就说如果你在像我住那个趟也是很多中国人，有些孩子就说总是喜欢跟中国孩子在一块儿，中午吃饭也是中国孩子在一块儿，放学也是中国孩子在一块儿，你就觉得他没有外国人朋友。我倒不是觉得他非要去交外国人，就是说我很随意，我遇到外国人我就说外国话，遇到中国人我说中国话。就对于我们来说，已经到中年了，也许我们就是很 easy handle 这种事儿。但是我就想，孩子是公立学校还是私立学校，给他们有更好的 background， 让他们 environment， 让他们更能像我们现在这么自如。
其实几个方面吧，私立学校呢，一般来讲very selective，因为 you have to pay tuition。In general, right? 公立学校呢 it's free, but it's not free. We pay property tax in Montgomery here. So in general, maybe public school is much more diverse. In general, it's not. 另外呢，就是私立学校size sometimes smaller， 小一点，公立学校更大一点。我们有一个朋友从 New Jersey 到 Cincinnati， 从公立学校到Cincinnati 以后，去了私立学校，又换到公立学校，又换到私立学校 ，back and forth 3 times。他就发现就是说，在公立学校因为比较大，所以呢，它实际上 provide the activity 就是活动 ，after school activities are much bigger. For the private school. But at the same time, his feedback is in the private school, because it's selected a group, the competition for go to advanced class is much higher. In public school, that was in Cincinnati, there's no problem for him to go to advanced class. In private school, almost everyone wants to go to the advanced class. So they just went back and forth. Regarding the what I was going to say, I think it also depends on the location. Like Montgomery here, we truly enjoy being here after being in private school for 8 years for my daughter. And here is a much diverse in education. It's very much education oriented, traditional teaching oriented. It's a good combined experience for my daughter. When she was in private school, much more relationship with teachers, much closer. And they are focused, particularly for Montessori education, they are much more focused on the environment, how to resolve conflict, very much process-oriented, hands-on experience, and cultivate the quality of a personality or quality of life. Because the private school sometimes is small, it's much easier to do that. And coming here is much bigger. She's able to adjust, because I remember the first day for her 6th grade orientation. It was an experience for her. In Cincinnati, she had a class of 13 in her grade, and here was 400. It was a huge shock for her. The school in Cincinnati was only 150 kids. And here just one grade is 400. So it depends on what stage of your children and what your location of the school. There's no absolutely which one. It depends on what's the need of your child at what age.
Something you talked about your kids' diversity party. I kind of observed the same thing. When my daughter's last year's old diversity party, that would sleep over, and she had, I think, 3 concussion girls, because they're all girls, right? It's the roller party. And four Indian, and then there are not 3 Chinese girls. And this year she had her 10th year's birthday party, and she had 7 Chinese girls instead. Then the other is there's one concussion, the other 2 Indian. So I started kind of worrying a little bit too, like what you're saying, maybe if they're growing this affinity with their own types of kids. And I, from what you said, it kind of gave me some thought on there too. I couldn't quite understand what has driven this phenomenon here I'm observing. And maybe you're saying because the Chinese girls are more academic-oriented, are more, how would I say, obeying 听话, right? Listen, have better listening skills. She feels they're more like similar to she is, right? Well, I remember the next year's birthday, one of the concussion girls got her head like drawn from somewhere because they're just wild, basically. In my book, right? But no, I understand in a bit, and kind of put what you said with what I've observed together.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also mentioned from, I don't know where you got that, maybe that's what my question would be, is after they have the passing stage, when they go to college, maybe this kind of affiliation will change. But I don't know, is that going to change or if not? But I tend to agree it might change because university is a different environment, they're more independent, and they can choose, they know better about who's the person they like to affiliate to, right? But still in my mind, I have my doubts because I haven't seen it happen, right?
Yes. I actually tried to find a literature on this peer friendship for Chinese Americans. There's not much. Because that is the question has been on my mind, whether it's healthy or it's not healthy. On one side, I'm very happy. She has so many Chinese friends. And why driven them to go together? It's not too clear to me. There's not much empirical study on Chinese American in their friendship formation. And maybe our teen experts here can give us some insight why it's happening.
Because my daughter, my older one, she's almost 5, and I already observed this because since 2.5-year-old, she went to the daycare, and all the friends she's been having is Chinese girls. I don't know why. It's just because she's so young. Like she's not even. She's only like 4. Like she's almost gonna be 5, and she already know that. Like in her class, like this year, her daycare she changed. Her classmates changed. So out of the 12 girls, there are 2 other Chinese girls, and she picked them as her friends. So I just don't know. I think maybe I'm creating an environment that we speak too much Chinese because she doesn't have enough exposure to.
Actually, what you observe in kindergarten, actually many. Because I was a kindergarten preschool teacher before, and I do see even at that young age, they tend to group in the classroom. So maybe actually that will be a topic for one of the seminars that we can focus on. I think it's a very interesting topic and a very important topic for us because we are puzzled and we don't have that experience. There's not much literature to tell us. So maybe we can have more further discussion or have someone to do some homework and share with us. Go ahead.
我觉得可能长一样重要。因为我刚来美国的时候，我想跟美国就是美国人交朋友，他们都没有一个人跟我交。后来我去找那些 American born Chinese， 他们很容易就是接受我一个朋友，因为我不会说英文嘛，他们就一点一点教我。那时候我就很感动，我就觉得。除非是长得一样的话，中国人干什么东西，他就自然就帮助你。那你说长得不一样的话，他就说的话，动物也是嘛。
Well, I think 2 things I can comment on, and just from our own experience, when we come here, we tend to be with Chinese most of the time. And I think it become a negative stereotype in the university that Chinese don't reach out to the other students and only stay with. And I think there's a lot of emotional support here. And now this relationship is dynamic, it's bidirectional. And we don't know if there is rejection or if that's we are not seeking. We don't know what's the dynamic between the cross-race peer relationship.
Hi, I have a question. Where I walk through the walks of identity. But one question I have for you is if you had a study of parents accepting that these kids have these identity issues. Because I find from a lot of my friends, colleagues, who are Asian or non-Asian, they would have like a sense of identity crisis, and their parents think that, oh, it's nothing, it's phase, it'll go away. It's a sense of denial that I see from parents, but I don't know if you had further research on that.
No, but I think it's so, we don't have that personal experience to relate to and to be empathetic and then to understand, to help. And we're even not aware of there's such confusion. And this confusion is a natural process. It's not something wrong with our children. It's the rite of a passage they have to walk through. And we are not prepared. Our parents are not prepared because we don't have the experience. And then also there's not much research to tell us how to help our children.
Just a short question. I wonder whether you can recommend us to some book or reading to parents on how to help our kids to cope with challenging questions.
Challenging questions
yes, for example, where are you from? Those kind of questions. How to respond to those very offending questions, intentionally or unintentionally.
I think that's a very good book to write, research to do, because I can assure you that there's not much research, because as I preparing for this talk, because this was not my research specialty, and I did a lot of literature research, and there is not much, particularly for Asian Americans, how to prepare our children to respond to those questions in a positive way. And that was the only study actually I can find compare with African American, Latino American, and Japanese American, and I feel like it was giving me some tips. But there are some books out there written in general for ethnic minorities, like anti-race curriculum. So there's some literature there, but particularly for Asian American, because our physical appearance is very different, and also. There's a study that says among the ethnic group, Chinese is perceived as the least, or Asian is perceived as the least American among all the ethnic group. And there's another survey that says when they were asked, are you comfortable to vote for a candidate for vote for Chinese candidate for presidency? Are you comfortable vote for African American candidate for presidency? And there's a high percentage of people who are not comfortable have Asian American candidate to be president. It's much higher than African American. So for Asian Americans, I do see there are some special developmental challenges we face, but there are not that many research out there for in the field of child development, in psychology, in sociology. It's getting out there, but it's not to a level we feel that, okay, tell me what to do, at a very practical level.
The last question.
王教授你好，刚才听了您那个讲座吧，我挺受启发的。我也想问您一个其实一直困惑我的问题。我有一个9岁的儿子，现在在上4年级，他的学校和班里几乎很少有 Chinese 的，他handle的朋友也都是白人。然后他经常回家就问我的一个问题就是：妈妈，为什么你让我学的东西都是 American kids 不学的东西？ 是那个 Chinese 的 candidate 对吧，或者是什么 India candidate，我不是很清楚，所以也是很困惑我，就说怎么样 keep balance， 就是既要融入主流社会对吧，但是你又要保持你自己的这种Chinese 这种 culture 或者怎么样，如果那个能 keep 这种 balance， 就是不要让 kids 这么困惑。我的儿子经常就问我这种问题，所以也想请教。好，谢谢。
谢谢。Actually, I don't know if I have a right answer for you, but I think it's a challenge for most of us because the orientation is very different. We focus so much on what we believe is important, and our children want to be part of American kids, and their culture practice, what they emphasize, is very different from us. So my kids ask me too before, why I have to do this, why other kids not doing this, why I have to do this. So it's going to be ongoing. It's because the value we have is very different between two cultures, and the kids are kind of in between. And to have a good balance, it's hard. I want to share a recent conversation with my daughter. 2 nights, she asked me, Mom, when did you date Dad? She's 13. And I said, 26. Before Dad, did you date someone else? I said, yes. When? I think it was in college. Then she said, when can I date? She's 8th grade. This year she's 8th grade. And I said, maybe in senior. I said, Mom, what do you mean senior? I said, well, in senior, you are done with all whatever the SAT exam college application, right? So you have a time, and then you're going to date, and you have a heartbreak, and then you come home, Mom, someone dumped me, so you have a shoulder to cry on, right? And I want you to have that experience before you go to college. So they start the expectation. I know she's going to date before 12th grade, right? On one side, I'm telling myself, should I give my kid some kind of expectation in advance? So then they work this and negotiate, rather than without give that kind of boundaries, and let's see what happens. So it's going to be challenging. This is a similar situation that the dominant society, the common practice that our children are going to identify, and our way of thinking what's important, and this is a too big a gap, and how to keep the balance. And the concept of dating is very different between what I think and what they think, and that's another, I think, potential difference regarding the dating topic. Okay.
We can continue this topic the whole day. I love it. I really appreciate the time that Professor Wang spent with us, and I believe we have a lot of questions for her, and we actually have a dinner after today's conference at Hongchen. Probably some of you know where it is. So if you are interested in asking more questions, you are welcome to join our dinner after the conference. Let's give Professor Wang another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Just 1 second.
Oh yeah. What to Professor Wang?
Thank you very much. Actually, okay. Actually, to show my appreciation of your leadership.
可以吧？不行，那还有这个相机，少多少遍。